Yep, we've got it.
Perfect. So I think we are in business. And again, I apologize for the delay in the start here. So I'll hand it over to you, Bob.
Okay, I'd like to call our May 30th meeting to order. And I'd like to have everybody look at the agenda and request a motion to approve the agenda. Thanks, Glynis. Thanks, Ken. All in favor? Okay, first item of business is the land acknowledgement. And I believe, Jeff, you are up.
Yeah, sure. Just one moment, guys. This is a weird day. I'm sitting in my car outside of my daughter's piano instructor's house, and they have a recital today. So at one point during this meeting, I might just run across for like a 5-minute window to hear her play. Then I'll be back in the car. So yeah, the things we do to make it all happen. Thanks, Bob. Give me one moment here. I'm just pulling up my land acknowledgement. Okay, here we go. Throughout my short time on council, I've gained greater exposure to the practice of land acknowledgement. And one thing that started to seep in organically through recognizing this land known as Shooting at Willows is not only a greater sense of place, but a heightened appreciation of time. And when one realizes that the First Nations have practiced this custom of showing reverence for the land for generations upon generations, time immemorial, I can't help but see the scope of our actions under the new lens of a distant future. In our settler society that fixates on what happens by the financial quarter, it takes vision to imagine how our decisions will impact beyond this year, beyond this decade, beyond our lifetimes. But I can't help but wonder what other epiphanies will arise as we strive for right relations. This valley is under conflict and attack, and our decisions now are more important than ever. With that, I would like to say that I'm fortunate and very grateful to live vibrantly on the land of the Treaty 7 people, the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, the Tsuut'ina, the Yahe Nakota Nations, Chiniki, Bearspaw, Wesley, and the Métis Nation Region 3. In the spirit of change, I am committed to seeking truth and reconciliation. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. And we need somebody to volunteer for our next meeting.
That's June 20th, is it, Bob?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, I can volunteer for June 20th.
Okay, thanks, Glynis. Okay, now let's move on to the approval of the minutes. Has everybody had a chance to look at the minutes from our May 2nd meeting?
Mm-hmm.
And if so, can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make the motion.
Thanks, Kevin. Could I have a seconder, please? Thanks, Jeff. All in favor?
Just one question, Caitlin, the points that I raised, those changes were made?
Yeah, I believe I got them.
Okay,
yeah.
Great, thanks. Then I approve.
Okay. Motion is carried. Okay, on to unfinished business. Caitlin, update and review of action items.
Yeah, there's not a lot from the last meeting. Caitlin Miller and I, you met her last week from Enforcement Services, are still going to be having conversations around creating brochures to educate. I know we had talked about potentially looking at distributing those through rentals, hotels, vet clinics and stuff. So we still have to do a bit more digging into that. It's been a busy month for Caitlin. She's planning the emergency management exercise that'll be happening this week. So, or this weekend. So she's full steam ahead on that. So once that settles down from her, we'll dig into this a bit more. We have to get a bit more information from parks on where pets on leash signs could be found. Still have to do that. It's been a bit of a busy month, and it's been a shorter month for me. So I do apologize. I don't have answers for all of you. And we had some stuff come up with salamanders in the past month. So I was focusing on getting the salamander signs and the rope at Quarry Lake reinstalled. So there's salamander habitat at the dog pond up there. So that was our bit of our focus with parks around that signage and getting those ropes replaced. But we have had some conversations around the status of fruit trees on town-owned land, and they indicated that there's only, I think it was five trees on town-owned land that are within downtown Canmore. There are trees within the right-of-ways. So residents have planted those, but they're not I guess the town technically has jurisdiction to go in and cut them down because they're in the utility right of ways along our road system, but that's not necessarily a direction we've taken yet. So maybe as discussions further on this, that might come up. But at this point, there is 5 trees downtown, and they are on the radar of the Parks Department to be removed.
Why would they remove them, Caitlin? I know they
I don't-
got fruit on them, but I'm sure there's lots of volunteers that'll pick the fruit off at the appropriate time.
Yeah, so it's and I guess I don't have the complete history, Ken, so I apologize that I can't give you the history, but that to me has been the stance that they have been taking, is to remove these wildlife attractants, especially since we're trying to encourage residents to also not plant wildlife fruit tree or wildlife attracting fruit trees. And so they are mountain ash trees, is I believe is what's left. And so that has just been the direction that the town has gone to date. And I could look for a bit more of the background of why they took that stance, as opposed to having a program where people can come and pick fruit.
Because Mountain Ash does add a lot of character to the downtown core, for color wise as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'll make a note and see if I can get a bit more clarity on the background as to why that is.
And if I can, this is I have staff who are did a lot of work this time last year, which is a berry crop failure, Ken, and so bears were because they had no other food, were hitting mountain ash trees for the first time, and because it's mountain ash. I mean, yes, there's an ornamental value. There's no food value for humans, and that I'm aware of anyway, and I'm not sure where these volunteers would come from if we had them go in and remove them from a tree just as they're getting nice and red and ripe. So it's just, I suppose it's, I would characterize it as just one of those things we need to kind of embrace if we're going to actually practice coexistence between humans and challenging difficult wildlife like these bears that we share the valley with. So that's kind of the background that, and this direction comes from my staff, who have seen a couple of bears destroyed last fall because they were getting into trouble with mountain ash trees in town.
Perfect. Thanks, Gareth, for that additional background. And I do suspect that the points that you raised around capacity and ability to get volunteers to do that kind of fruit removal is most likely limited. So it's in order to protect the wildlife and the bears and prevent them from coming into town, it was most likely the most reasonable approach at the time. But I will make sure to ask that question. And then the last point I had from the previous meeting was around getting someone from Alberta Environment and Parks to come speak to us in June. And so there is a gentleman from Alberta Environment Parks who is committed to come talk to the group about their stance on wildlife and wildlife management for Alberta Parks. So that'll be on June 20th. So mark your calendars. And that's all for my update. Bob?
Okay. Thank you, Caitlin. I guess main focus of our meeting tonight is the terms of reference review for the Silvertip Lady Macdonald gondola. And I hope everybody got Caitlin's last email from about less than an hour ago, which had Yukon to Yellowknife's review of the terms of reference. Very comprehensive, covers a lot of the things that I had flagged and a lot more. So, and then Glynis had also put together a review sheet based on our EIA reviews, in the same format. And I'm just wondering if we could if everybody's got the terms of reference from the Y to Y, and maybe we could pull up that spreadsheet as well, Caitlin, if you've got it.
Yeah, so I agree. I think the best way maybe is to I can share my screen with that spreadsheet. So just give me a second, and I have it side by side here with the Let me just find, sorry. It's not letting me share the side by side, but you can see this document here that I'm working on.
Right.
Is that big enough for everybody?
It's good for me.
Perfect.
Hey, just quick question here, Caitlin.
Mhm.
So ERC's terms of reference review, will that be presented on behalf of the town to Alberta Parks? I'm just trying to confirm like
Yeah.
because I know this is a weird one because it's a
Mhm.
provincial thing. So I just want to make sure that this work is crystallized and seen and stuff. I just want to make sure.
Yes, yeah. So I guess that's great. And thank you for bringing that up to provide a bit more clarity and context around this one. So how this will work is, so because it falls outside of kind of what ERC typically provides feedback on, which is the EISs that are going to council for council decision, and that this is a provincial terms of reference EIA process, the town, like any public stakeholder or any public member, so you as individuals can also provide feedback on this as an individual. The town is providing their thoughts. And so the ERC review will be brought in along with the third-party reviewer that we use for the EISs. And so we're putting that, this will all be sent to our planning department. They're combining both the third-party reviewer, the ERC comments, and town staff comments into a document that will go under a legal review from our town legal counsel, and then that gets sent to the province in response for the terms of reference. So it's not going to be a standalone document that goes from ERC. It'll be combined with the comments from the third party reviewer and staff.
Okay.
So if you have something that you're absolutely passionate about, and you're worried that it might not get captured in the town's official comments, you're more than welcome and free to submit your own personal comments as well through the website on the Silvertip Gondola.
With deadline of June, is it 13th? Do I remember that correctly? Does anyone know?
I believe, yeah, it's around then. It's in early to mid June.
Thanks, Caitlin.
Yeah. And the Caitlin, is the third party, is it going to be MSIS again, or is there a different?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's right. Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so they're very familiar with the EIS process, and they were looking at it from the lens of because this is sort of different, if we have to use the EIA as our EIS in the council approval process, once it goes further down the line, does it meet the EIS requirements as well? Which I think is, Glenys, you in the table that you started, that's the angle you took as well.
That's right. I was starting out from the point of view of if we were managing this from the town, within the town, then we would use our EIS policy for the contents. So that's where I started from.
And just a question about a process. Thanks for beginning with the end in mind here, Caitlin and Jeff. So the container for the EARC's comments, will that be this document that we're all looking at right now?
Well, I kind of thought since Glenys so wonderfully wrote this all out, and it's, I think, pretty organized, that I was about to start writing one out, a way to do this. And then Glenys sent me this, and it was just like a haha. So I thought maybe we could use this if the group all agreed. I think it kind of aligns with the approach that ERC has typically taken with reviews, and it aligns very much with what we kind of had authority over reviewing for the EIS process in terms of like consistency for the terms of reference. Authority is not the right word, but I hope you understand what I'm trying to say, and that it kind of is consistent with how we typically give feedback. So if everyone's okay with this format, I can just go through as we talk and add additional comments in this comment section. And then I know the feedback from both MSIS and from Y2Y are a bit more in a bulleted fashion, but they're looking at it from a very strict wildlife biologist perspective, and so they can provide maybe more detailed comments, and maybe we're looking at more of alignment with terms of reference requirements for the EIS, where we can also add in some additional comments and thoughts. Does that make sense? I feel like I rambled in circles there a little bit.
I think it's a good tool for us to go through this exercise for sure. Like we've used this format, for previous EISs. I don't see a real need to change it unless anybody else has another suggestion.
I think Glynis has done an awesome job, and I gotta thank you for doing that. Helped me a lot. Thank you.
No worries. I was just going to say that at the end of the meeting today, we can also just do a check and see if there are any points that really need emphasizing, and in which case we could also provide a cover note.
Yep.
And I'm just wondering, I think it's a great format. I tend to do comments like this, so thank you, Glynis. I do have some comments written down separately, and would it be easier to possibly put it into like the SharePoint Excel file that we can all type into, or would you like me to maybe send them to you separately, Caitlin?
Yeah, I think we could just put it in the shared point, and then if you want to write them in, we could do that. Perhaps you could just speak to them now, and then I'll send it out afterwards, and you could add any comments and just. So I'm not frantically trying to type as you're talking, but if anybody has any concerns with your comments, then we can address it in the group format, if that works.
That works for me, if it's okay with everyone else.
Perfect.
So do we just want to move through with the sections that Glynis put in, and then we can have a conversation? And I think Caitlin, if you have time, maybe you could make small notes under the comments section. That'll help us move this thing along as well.
Yep, for sure. I can do that.
Okay, so let's start with item 1 then. Proposal overview. Has anybody got anything additional that they caught or identified that should go into comments for the proposal overview?
Well, I'd like to see more description. It just says under A, description of the proposal. There's things like construction methodology, timing of construction, access road, construction laydown area, public safety, site security. Maybe I'm getting too involved here, but like I'd like to see that sort of information included.
And is that, just for clarity, so I'm making the right comment, is that section 2.1A? You think that's missing?
Well, I'd like to, okay, so what is the description of the proposal, right? Like, is there more information? Like, I guess the issue here is, what is the description of the proposal? Are they talking about the site?
To be clear, the wording on that left-hand column is from the Town of Canmore EIS policy.
Right.
So what's written up in the terms of reference, I'm just having a quick look to see how much
Right.
detail is required there for
Exactly.
the project description. It
Yes.
certainly doesn't, it has a construction schedule, but not construction methodology. So that's something that we could flag as
Right,
being
because
helpful.
when I look at the map of the area in question, I think there's several, like, for example, there's several towers. I don't know how many, but that brings another question in terms of tower construction, the impacts within our town itself, right?
Right.
I again, I mean, how are they going to build these towers? We're going to use helicopters, and that brings in noise into the area. Like, sorry, I don't mean to go off kilter, but I don't know. There's a lot to be desired here.
Yeah, so they do talk about in the terms of reference for the Silvertip gondola in their project description, section 2.1, the overview, they talk about providing maps and drawings of all components of the projects, provide
Right.
generalized project phasing and construction schedules, discussing alternatives for projects and the reasons for not selecting any of the identified alternatives, implications resulting from delays proceeding with the project or any phase of the project, and implications for not going ahead. So they talk about a lot more than what's listed in the EIS requirement. So if there's something specific that you think is missing, Kevin, I can type that in. So right now I have construction methodology is missing.
Right.
And I guess the reference would be 2.1C, which is describe and provide maps or drawings of all components of the project. So
Yeah. Okay. So that kind of builds on your comment then, Glenys, of it doesn't
Yeah.
specifically ask for the context of this. Okay.
Right.
Sorry, isn't the construction schedule and project phasing, that would be 2.1D, not C?
Yep. Is that okay, Glenys, or did you have a reason for wanting C?
well, I just thought Kevin was talking about the towers and whatnot, so I was thinking that was a component of the project rather than the phasing and
Yeah.
that's why I thought C, but
I think the
that's
actual
where-
staging, sorry,
Yeah.
Kevin.
That's where I actually highlighted it from 2.1C, correct.
C.
Okay.
Okay.
Is this not component at a higher level, not at the detailed description? Like giving an overview of the whole thing?
I think it's the only place in the terms of reference that where a project description is provided, and the rest is looking at impact assessment, baseline conditions and impact assessment. So I don't think there's another section other than the overview, project description overview.
Yeah, again, it's an overview, not a detailed description. I think throughout the thing they talked about the noise issue, I read that in there, and I think about the towers, but they don't get into the construction process, and I think that's at a different stage of the development within how we do it within the community. I'm not sure how they do it within the province, though,
Right.
for the detailed stuff.
Okay. Well, do you want because these comments will be reviewed against all the other comments that come in from the town. So if we want to add in how I kind of added it here, that it doesn't specifically ask for context of existing site conditions, constraints, and construction methodology. Does that capture the thought, or did I miss it still? And then the town in the review can determine if that's too detailed for this level or not.
No, I think that's a reasonable approach. It doesn't hurt to put the detail in, and if the city feels it's not needed, then you can always have it taken out.
Yeah, and then if anyone wants to submit their own personal comments, they are able to do so.
And just while we're on maps, one thing that I noticed that I think is missing that ties into one of the comments that Glenys has later in here is that she mentioned that a cumulative effects assessment was really needed, or cumulative impacts. And I completely agree. And something I'm seeing a lot in my work right now is proponents trying to just narrow down to a tiny area for cumulative effects assessment. So when it comes to maps, is there the potential to tie in a requirement around scale, like that they have to have one map that shows like all the features around it at a scale that maybe someone here would have input about, that would correspond a bit more with like the dispersal distance of animals in the area, something that's a bit more related to landscape level change.
I can just comment on that. I think that's a really great point, and I'm grateful to both Glenys and Waverly for raising it. And I had the privilege of attending a webinar this morning with staff from the Yellowstone to Yukon. It was, and they released today, and it's on their website, their cumulative environmental assessment, and looking about taking the grizzly bear as a focus species, looking at disturbance of the grizzly bear, but also in potential human risks with future development and indeed recreation. And I'll drop that link. It is relevant to this, in my opinion. It's the first ever CEA of this valley that I'm aware of. It is the first ever because I've been on the ground for 30 years and haven't seen anything like it. So it's pretty neat. And I'll drop that link into the chat, and it's for possible reference in Glenys's document.
So you would like that added at the bottom of this document as like as a reference document, Gareth?
I think it's relevant. And the other thing I would just say is that things, it's tremendously important that we start taking the big picture as we consider individual developments. And so because the YY has done this big picture view, and we have the regional context and kind of some forecasts for 2050 and so on. I think it's relevant to anyone commenting on this on the terms of the ERA. So it's sure a reference, but possibly also having what's in that document inform our comments as individuals, or indeed as a EARC committee. Understanding that the timing sucks, but anyway, there you go.
Right. Okay. Well, when you send that over, I'll add it in here at the bottom. Okay. So sorry, Waverly. Is there a way that you would like me to capture what you said?
Sure. Let me just come up with some wording here. What if a listing of maps were required, and that listing should include a map that displays surrounding environmental features that may be impacted at the landscape scale?
Often in provincial terms of reference, there is an explicit request for a local study area and a regional study area to be considered for the project specific and cumulative impacts. And then, it's not unusual to that they specify the map scale that's required for soils assessment, for instance. And I don't think we need to specify what it is because they are the technical experts, but just, as you worded it. But I think we also need to add in the concept of study area, because that hasn't been included either in this terms of reference, I think.
No, I like that, the regional study area. And my comments are coming from a place of not knowing the Alberta system as well so far. So I really appreciate that.
Okay. So is this, did I catch what you're saying? A listing of maps required, with one being a map of the surrounding environmental features that may be impacted at the regional study area? That doesn't make sense, I don't think. But.
Maybe within the regional study area?
Yeah, sure.
I think something needs to be said that a regional and local study area needs to be defined as well. So we need to have that identified by the proponent as well.
Defined?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, perfect. Does anybody else have any other comments on it's section 2 of the proposed terms of reference, but it correlates with section 1 of the EIS, the project overview or proposal overview?
Okay, let's move on.
Okay. So related to existing site conditions section of the EIS, Glennis has pointed out that section 3 captures what is typically captured under the existing site conditions of the EIS. Does anybody have any comments around this section?
The only part I had on that was that just section three right at the beginning? Because there was just a section in there I was wondering about if the province specifically identifies which research or inventories they might have about wildlife movement, habitat, that sort of thing. Or should we mention that as such? Because there is quite a bit of current stuff and there is some outdated stuff as well. So I would hope that the province would bring in the good stuff and suggest that they use certain data files to develop their mapping.
Yeah, along a similar line, Ken, I think that there should be a gap analysis performed on the existing data to see where there is information lacking, and that their studies should not just rely on historical information.
Just a question as we're getting further into this. From a provincial standpoint, would you typically have like a policy context section of the EIA, I guess it is? And I ask because typically those sections really focus on like Western colonial policy, and you don't see anything about the treaties or about, you know, consultation protocols that actually need to be focused on. So there's often an opportunity to add that kind of thing in at a terms of reference stage.
To be honest, I'm not familiar. I'm not sure if anyone else, Glennis, it sounds like you have a bit more background in the EIA process, if you have thoughts.
Yeah, they usually, and in this one as well, say that I'm just looking for it in here, but I know in my document, I had that they had the policy context to be included and under the scope section. It says that the EIA report shall be prepared considering all provincial federal legislation, but then there is also a traditional ecological knowledge section in it as well. So they haven't completely bypassed the sort of Indigenous considerations, and I don't know that it specifically talks about treaty rights and considerations.
Okay, yeah, that's helpful. I'm the terms of reference that I'm used to seeing in other provinces kind of like actually state which policies they're going to have to talk about. So I was wondering if that would be typical here, but it sounds like it's not. And if, yeah, I can come back to the other comments on that later here. I'll take all the air.
Was there something Waverly you would like me to capture at this point, or?
No, I was just trying to make sure that we weren't going past the last one and that I'd make you all come back to it. So
Okay.
that's all
Okay,
good.
perfect. Just so I can be sure that I'm capturing this correctly, I think it was Ken who mentioned this initially. Is this fair? Consider a review of existing data and a gap analysis of where data is missing regarding wildlife movement. Does that capture your thought?
I think it'll catch, you know, between Bob's information gap analysis, and that's kind of where I was heading off as well. Just making sure that I know the province is going to provide them direction, at least I suspect they will, as to where that information is available, and we'll make the provincial information available as well.
Okay.
So I think you've got it pretty much captured there, Caitlin.
Okay, perfect, great. All right,
The
is
only
there-
other part in here, I don't know if Waverly had some more comments she wanted to put in there. But there was a number of things in there just talking about soil disturbance, because you're starting to get on some pretty steep terrain there.
Mhm.
And what sort of mitigation strategies are they taking to address soil erosion? There's a bunch of things I'm just not sure about, like ecosystem phase. What is that? I don't know what ecosystem phase means. You know, I've got a lot of experience with ecosystems, but I've never heard ecosystem phase, unless it's something in Alberta they use.
Okay.
I think under existing site conditions, could we not also include current land use in the area? Because there's already people that use that mountain for hiking as well. So this project is going to be cumulative to that existing land use. So I think that might be something to describe under existing site conditions as well.
So a review or a review of existing land uses, recreational land uses specifically.
Well, that's what came to mind, but I'm not sure if there's any other human land use up there.
Oops. Is that a fair capture of that comment? Review of existing land uses, example recreation.
Yeah, that works. That works for me.
Okay, and then I wrote review of existing soil conditions and mitigation strategies for soil erosion. Perfect. Okay.
And if I could suggest that we actually just take off the example of recreation, because if you talk about existing land uses, we often end up commenting about, like, if the Indigenous nations were to comment, there are existing land uses, but then there are also land uses that would be existing if it weren't for what has already happened. So sometimes leaving that a bit more broad can be helpful.
Okay, so just remove recreation would capture that way, really, or do you want me to remove existing?
Well, it seems like it has to be existing under this category.
Yeah, okay.
One of the things that comes to mind, Waverly, and again, on this question of recreation, is it a designated trail that community has established? Or is it some groups that have decided to build their own trails illegally and created potential issues? Yes, there's recreational activities, there's hiking, biking, but are they off the designated trails or on the designated trails? I think we have to be careful with that one in my mind.
Yeah, no, I would agree that I'm sure there'd have to be a look at, and there's mapping systems of both the designated and unsanctioned trails. Is that something, Ken, you want captured?
Yeah, I think it should be, if we're looking at this from a perspective from Canmore, representing Canmore, I
Mhm.
think it should be designated recreational activities and not ad hoc ones.
Okay.
But Ken, if you look at this as a project, even the ad hoc uses are still uses whether they're sanctioned or not. So they would still be. It's like saying we have off-leash dogs, but we don't know what to do about them. So that's not a sanctioned activity either.
No, I'm not saying, yeah, it's just that, Canmore has worked fairly hard to designate trails for recreational activities. And yes, there are, people walking all over the place. And we're trying to keep them into more, I guess, specific areas
Mhm.
To manage the interaction with wildlife, to reduce the amount of garbage that's being distributed, that sort of thing. So keeping the habitat as close as possible to its natural form. So when they're building this, it's good to be aware of other activities that are going on, but the focus should be on protecting trails that have been established and designated, and not worry too much about those trails that are not. I guess that's where I was coming from.
Right. No, I think I understand what you're saying, and I'm wondering if that might fall more under the analysis of the impact, because that's looking not not at, well, maybe at the, I was gonna say-
And they have captured that under 3.8.2 Part A, Part B. they do look at impacts due to increased access to the area, which would include both designated and other land use. So on the impact assessment side, they have included those factors. On the baseline information, it's more about policy and initiatives rather than actual land use. So I think it's a fair comment to include that they should be talking about the land use and maybe divide it up by designated and informal or other, ad hoc use.
So maybe,
One of the things that's come to mind, it just comes from experience in dealing in my career. We have had designated heritage trails, for example, and they wanted to do some logging, and they had to protect the structure of that trail. And I'm wondering if that's something that, no, it's not a heritage trail, but it's still a designated trail that may be there. And that should be extra effort to protect the structure of that. And that's really where you want to put your focus in, and those non-designated trails you're not as concerned with.
right, so that would be, so we would address that in the impact, as we could address that comment in the impact assessment phase of this review. But
Yeah, it flows into that, yeah.
yeah, but at this point, a review of existing land uses, formal and or informal. Do you think that captures? I know Waverly requested earlier that we remove recreation because it limited it, but I don't know if this is. Sorry,
I think
Waverly.
that keeps it more broad. I guess I've seen it where something very specific like recreation only gets mentioned, and then that's the only thing focused on. But if you say formal and informal, or even if you want to list a few things and say like including but not limited to, then I think that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, and they have listed sort of the very high level areas like parks and protected areas, heritage rivers, heritage sites, but not down to the sort of the actual human use of the area.
Right. Okay. So do you want me to add in including but not limited to a few things, or do we want to just kind of leave it more general right now?
I think that what you got is good. You could put the reference to 3.8.1 B, which is where those other higher level land uses are listed. Yeah.
So add review of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Any other comments for this section?
Another question from a new Albertan. Would we expect them to outline what sort of field studies they would do to get all of this information on existing site conditions?
Not in the terms of reference usually, but not the methodology to be used, because they also can rely on existing information in the literature. They don't necessarily have to do all of the studies. So they specify the information that is needed, and then the proponent needs to define what they're going to do to be able to provide the information required. So as Bob mentioned, the gap analysis from existing information to what's required for this purpose.
Okay, I really appreciate that. That then the opportunity that we're creating to comment on methodology is in the gap analysis. So I think that covers it.
Okay, so there's no additional comment there then. Okay. Does anybody else have anything they want to add at this point? If not, we can move to the analysis of
I
impact.
don't know where this would fit in, but I'm just wondering if comparison to this project to existing gondolas in Alberta would be appropriate. Whether we look at Lake Louise and Sunshine and say, okay, what is positive or negative about those two projects, and how this would compare to those projects.
So I wonder if that is a under here where sorry, Glenys, you have these missing greenhouse gas, visual impact, cumulative impacts. Would it be missing comparison to? Would that be appropriate?
I think that section would probably handle it.
Yeah, I mean, it could be there, or it could be even in the project description overview, because it is sort of a high level gondola project benefits. And is that what you mean, or do you mean environmental impacts of those other gondola projects?
Yeah, I was more concerned with the environmental impacts of those projects.
Okay. So
then,
for context, yeah, so Caitlin, the comment could be missing sort of benchmarking of environmental impacts of existing gondola projects in Alberta. That might be the way to introduce it.
I know at Lake Louise, they put a new lift in and used pretty much helicopters for the whole time. So the other thing is they kept the right of way for the gondola to a minimum. Or not gondola, but the chair to a minimum. So maybe that's something you want to think we should be thinking about is, the impacts. They kind of address it indirectly. Maybe just keeping the right of way to a minimum and addressing how they're going to do that. Are they going to helicopter log it down, or are they going to skid it down? That sort of stuff. Because that has a significant impact on such as the vegetation, soil erosion, and wildlife habitat as well, plus access for the public.
Yeah, so that would be under section 4, the mitigations, recommendations, and conclusions. We're missing benchmarking of mitigation methods proposed versus those used for existing gondola projects in Alberta. And then you could put Ken's example about minimizing right-of-way.
Yeah, so benchmarking of mitigation strategies used in other gondola projects.
Again, that's a very good point, because when you look at the map, at least 3/4 of the right-of-way alignment is within the town's area, right?
Yeah.
Within the town's boundary.
Right. Okay, so just so I'm clear, we kind of skipped to section 4, but I'll just capture it since we're talking about it right now. We are missing a benchmarking of mitigation strategies used in other gondola projects within Alberta. Example, right-of-way size. Is there anything else we want to, or do we want to limit them by suggesting even one thing, similar to the comments made earlier? I don't know what I was writing here, benching.
Benching working. I think just the one example is good, and it doesn't really limit it because it does say example.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Great, so let's go back up here, I guess, to section 3 to make sure we've captured that, everyone's comments. If we didn't have anything else for to the existing site conditions. So this is looking section 3, analysis of impacts. So Glenys has pointed out several sections within the draft terms of reference that highlight or link to sections within our EIS process, where it's conformed, and then highlighted a few missing things, and the visual impact assessment, cumulative impact assessment, as well as the climate change impacts were all identified within the MSIS report as well. So I think everyone's singing the same tune, or from the same songbook, or whatever the saying is, on that one. So that's good to see.
The question, guys, is noise considered, does it fall into one of these analysis of impacts here? I'm just curious, operational.
I included it somewhere.
Noise during construction, yeah.
Yeah, it is included in section 3.1, air quality and noise.
Okay, just as air quality and then in comma, then it just drops off. So I was just trying to like, yeah.
Yeah, it is noise as well, and they have both construction and operational components that have the potential to increase noise levels. So that is included. Now, depending on how they define their study area, you know, there's the noise of extra traffic if people come in droves to come to the project, and so that's why defining the study area is important. It's not just necessarily the equipment itself.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a quick question, you guys, and Glynis, thanks for all your work on this. And so, for example, I was, because I had that meeting with the Y2Y, Josh Walsh mentioned that he had that they had this their critique of the EIA, which I forwarded along to this committee just because it's useful to triangulate and see what else is being said. I noticed, for example, that there was a specific reference made. The criticism is that they just used a boilerplate EIA template that had nothing to do with this area, nothing special about this area, and lacked detail, and didn't. An example of that is noise, and thanks, Jeff, for mentioning that. Another example of that is the fact that they don't mention bighorn sheep, which is a really kind of important consideration in my view. So, Glynis, are you able to, like, as part of this work, I just want to, just a question of process, I suppose, is it worth, so we've got that thoughtful analysis from these other guys, how can we ensure that, you know, the best of their thinking is woven into what we're thinking here?
So the document that Caitlin circulated before was the Y2Y comments, was it? That's the one that starts out with talking about boilerplate versus local considerations.
It's both. It's from both Y2Y and CPAWS. Actually, they put their heads together to come up with that. And there's a caveat in the email that says, you know, this is a draft. It may not be exactly the same as what they ultimately submit.
Right. So that they will be submitting it to the town or directly to the province.
Directly to the province, I believe. That they're not, going straight to the source and relying on us to do our own due diligence. But it's a thoughtful piece, and I just thought it might be useful to kind of that sheep thing, for example, as a small example, is one of about 50 bullets in their stuff. That sheep thing caught my eye, and there may be other bullets that are also relevant. So I guess my question is there possible that we might all review that and just send along kind of some of the big ideas we see to be included in this document that we're working on here?
Yeah, I mean, I just saw it an hour ago, so
I know
I haven't had a chance to look at it. But Caitlin, what do you think? How could we best? Or both?
Well, I guess we have kind of two approaches we can take, and I apologize. I was in meetings all afternoon, so this came in this afternoon, and I didn't get it sent out super snappy. So I apologize for that. But I guess we could take two approaches. Either one, we include it with the ERC, like if everyone takes a look at the Y2Y comments and says, generally I agree, we could just send that, because it's all going to be reviewed by the town planner, right? So it's not going to go forward in the format that we're currently presenting it. So we could just say, we also support the comments from Y2Y and CPAWS, and that they could pull those out, because there'll be alignments with the MSIS, with our comments, with everyone's comments, and they can pull out which ones they want to put forward. Or we could take it and pull out ones that we really want to focus on and put them specifically in our table. So those are kind of the two approaches I see that and how we could work with this. But we also, I guess the flip side or the benefit of maybe referencing the Y2Y one or attaching it to our comments is that we kind of stick to does this align with the EIS process terms of reference, and are they meeting those requirements? And then in addition, we just support all of this work that these very smart and well-versed biologists in the area are also saying. So
yeah, we can include a cover letter with when we submit this document as well, and make reference to the comments that we've got here, and that we are generally in alignment with those. And so we don't have to basically duplicate everything that's in the Y2Y document, but we can basically say that, you know, we are in alignment with, you know, most or all of their concerns.
yeah, if that's okay with everyone. Okay, so then just so I'm clear, we'll just continue with kind of the approach we're taking here. And then we will attach as an appendix to our submission the Y2Y documents and state in sort of a cover letter that these are our what we see as alignment with the EIS process terms of reference, and as well we support these additional public comments that are going forward. Everyone's thumbs up?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. That sounds good.
Thanks, folks.
Okay, so I guess back to analysis of impacts. Is there anything that we thought was missing that should be added that we typically look for in an EIS?
If I could just add one thing on the greenhouse gas mitigation. Would it be possible to add here greenhouse gas mitigation to align with IPCC's sixth assessment report? Because that, you know, to actually give a benchmark of like what you need to focus on, rather than them just being able to say it'll be low for X reason that we thought about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I think from as a town's response, the town's currently has a climate action plan that sets the targets. So it's 80% by 2050, which will be reviewed because the IBC targets have since changed since the climate action plan was first put in place. So I think it would make more sense to say to align to the town's climate targets, because the town itself isn't currently in alignment with the IPCC ones. So I don't know if it would look a little bit contradictory or I don't know if hypocritical is not the right word, but I think we would most likely be saying we would like you to align with the town's climate action goals as opposed to the international ones.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know what the planners think in terms of wiggle room there, because I do see it with other municipalities where they're able to then reference, you know, like the towns and this, because the IPCC ones tell us that, you know, greenhouse gas emissions, we've got like 2025 to make some serious changes, and then 2030. And if they're going to go build this thing and like run some major component off a diesel generator, or if they're going to, you know, run gas lines and not look at like fugitive methane emissions or just something like that, you could end up locking in something that's actually pretty, you know, impactful. So if there's a workaround for some of those like more bureaucratic processes, if we could say, I think they're worth mentioning, and the planners might have an idea about that.
Okay. Well, I mean, I guess we can, like, this is our submission to planning to consider, so we can put whatever the group really decides they want to put forward. And so I guess further to that, on Waverly, your comment. So impacts of proposed projects on greenhouse gas mitigation and climate change adaptation is planned, especially those of the town of Canmore. So how would you want to incorporate?
You could just say, and the most recent IPCC reports.
And not the summary for policymakers. They're heavily negotiated.
Yeah, I think that's good. and Waverly, I suppose you could provide, if we have a section of reference documents at the end, you could
Yeah, maybe provide a link to what specific document you would think that they best to reference.
Yeah, probably to the 6th assessment technical summary. The summary for policymakers ends up being like quite negotiated. I'm sure people know that, but it's not actually what the scientists put forward always.
Okay. I will look for a link for that unless you have it on hand, Waverly. You just put in the chat.
All right, send one.
Thanks.
May I throw a bit of a curveball here? How's the construction impacting greenhouse gases?
Impact of the proposed project and construction.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I know the town and the province are really looking at minimizing the amount of greenhouse gases as a result of construction and the materials that are being used as well.
Yep. That's fair.
Under this section, could we also include that's missing is an adaptive management plan for unforeseen impacts?
Oh, can we cite that? Is it Martin Zelensky who puts out the literature on how to actually do adaptive management well? I can try to find the paper.
An adaptive management. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. I was just wanted to confirm as you look at that, Bob, your comment, adaptive management plan.
For unanticipated impacts.
I'd have to find it, but if anyone else knows who he is, I think he's out of Alberta, and he worked a fair bit on the joint assessment panel for the proposed, was it the Bringa coal mine that was going to be in the headwaters? And he presented at I think on behalf of the DFO or on behalf of CPAWS, maybe. I owe you links.
Yes.
And sorry, Waverly, what was that in regards to?
It's adaptive management. It's like how to do adaptive management really well. So there's a prof at, I think, U Alberta, who has looked at how it is actually done through a bunch of projects and has like found all the deficiencies. And he has a overall framework. So you can actually end up writing it into an impact assessment where the proponent has to demonstrate how they'll touch on every aspect of that framework. And I will try my hardest to find it.
Yeah, that would be good to put in as a reference for sure.
Perfect. All right. Is there anything else that
Does
we
the
wanted
town
to? Sorry.
does the town require traffic impact assessments?
I believe so. As
Good.
part of the development process. I don't
That's
think
because- Okay.
I don't think it would be captured in this EIA process, but it would be part of the development process.
So
But we
I look
can-
at, sorry. Yeah, I'm looking at 3B, the town's EIS policy on page 3 of 6. Specific analysis of human use impacts resulting from the proposal. So something like, like traffic impact analysis, what's happening with a construction camp. There, and I can't find it, but there was one map that showed employee housing. So, is there an impact of those particular items?
Yeah, I believe engineering does a lot of that as part of the development process, but I'll
Okay.
just write it in.
That's fine, as long as it's referenced.
Yeah.
That comes later. That's great.
Yeah, it would be somewhere. It should be somewhere in a cumulative effects assessment, I would assume, socioeconomic impacts.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Is there anything else that we thought that we, especially under the context of what we typically would like to review in an EIS process. Like, what does council need to make decisions on down the road if this EIA is being used as an EIS? Is there anything that we typically look for that wasn't captured? And I mean, I don't want it necessarily, it doesn't mean a laundry list of things that we wish we could ask for, but I want to make sure we're capturing what we specifically might be missing in the EIS thing compared to the EIA in terms of reference being proposed.
Right.
While people are thinking about that, I don't have anything to your question specifically, Caitlin. In general terms, that point that was made in the Y2Y document and by one of the Y2Y staff I spoke with, which is really important in my view, is that if the NRCB approves this gondola, recent developments have shown that the town of Canmore's hands will probably be tied, and we can't rely on the town council to be able to do anything. And due to Section 619 of the Municipal Government Act, therefore, trying to kill this thing off early with a really robust critique of the EIA makes a ton of sense, and is frankly, it's the strategy of the environmental groups. And so it just underlines for me the importance of weighing in on this EIA. And I'm so glad, I just want to give a shout out to the committee for taking this on in its kind of prescient way, and the importance of individual members of the committee also making comment now that we've been well informed through this process.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, yeah. I think that's a lot of people's stance, is to make sure that we get it right from the beginning, because once the decision goes through, it's the decision. So I appreciate everyone's feedback, and I appreciate that the community looking to Y2Y, I'm sure the biosphere might have some comments that they might be putting forward, and even individuals. So it's always nice. Lots of feedback is always good. Okay. With that, is there anything else? And I mean, what I can do as well, because that was kind of a loaded question too. And then you also didn't have a ton of time to review the Y2Y document, is perhaps I will reshare after this meeting the Y2Y document, as well as put this this table that we're working off that Glenys developed in a shared folder, where maybe everyone could go and review it. They can go in and add comments, and we'll put track changes on so we know what's being added. So please don't just add anything without it being on track changes. And that we can give it a couple days to take a look at it, see if there's anything missing from our own table, or if there's anything in the Y2Y document that you don't agree with, or you're not comfortable supporting. Then we can, if there is stuff in the Y2Y document that as a group we're not comfortable supporting, we'll have to take a different approach and maybe pull out some of the things we really like into our own document, just so everyone's comfortable with the message that we're putting forward. So we'll take a couple days to do that, and then draft up a letter that we'll send. And it doesn't have to be super formal, because it's just going to our planning department, but just sort of outlining, this is our table, this is the Y2Y document that we support. Major theme is this kind of thing, so that they understand. And I don't know when this process has happened in the past, was it Lori who took on that position, or Bob, did you take on the position of writing that thing to make sure that it came from IRC and not administration?
Yeah, it comes from the chair.
Okay, perfect. Yeah.
Yes.
So then Bob will draft that up, and then you would circulate it to the group to confirm that everyone is on board.
Correct.
Perfect.
Hey, Caitlin, I think
and we also send it to mayor and council as well.
Right. Okay. And I think in this situation, we'll just send it to planning, because this is a response coming from planning. But I can confirm that with our planning department, just because the process is different, because it's not actually an EIS, right? Sorry, Gareth, you were.
Well, I just gonna say I totally support that. And just I'm very sympathetic. I mean, goodness knows I haven't, not another, this is all, timing's a bitch, right? With this whole why do I think and so on, coming at us at short notice. I've asked, I don't know if they'll have a chance to do it because they're running hard as well, like everyone else. But if I've asked them to try and, if they have time, to distill their several pages down into kind of the stuff that's most likely to stick and the big ideas. And if I get that, I'll send that around, because I think that it's just helpful, right, to get a summary. And I can, so thanks for your suggestions there, Caitlin.
Perfect. And I guess on that kind of note, if this is not Y2Y's document that they're actually putting forward, we want to make sure that we're supporting and attaching their official response, not a draft response if it changes. So if they are changing it, or if it is different, we should make note of that.
And just on a point of process, we might want to think about that, only because the timing may not permit us to address, unless I get her done tomorrow, which is highly unlikely. They're more likely to work towards the end of the, and then it puts us in a kind of behind the eight ball if we're waiting for that before we can refer to that. So maybe just the content, I don't know, maybe just there's some good ideas in there. I'd hate to see them lost.
No, I agree. Well, and I guess the flip side is that we could, because we're sending it to planning to review in order to put forward the official town response, that we can make that clear in our note that this was a draft. We agree with it in principle. We've highlighted our key concerns, and this is just for reference as you work through your review for the planning department. Maybe keep it more casual and informal. But let's, Gareth, if you have the proper contact at Y2Y or wherever who sent you this, just to confirm that we may be referencing it in the IRC's response back to planning, and they will pull out any comments that they feel are relevant.
Absolutely, well, I will do.
Just get that confirmation. Yeah. Thanks, Gareth.
Caitlin, just a couple quick questions. When does this have to be into planning?
We'll want to do it pretty quick here, because they have to turn it around before they have to turn around, and legal has to review it before I think that was the 13th.
13th of June?
Yeah. So I would say if we could take a look at in the next couple of
We'll have
days.
everything. I'm just thinking where we should go if we have additional comments and how we want to include the 2Y2. With our comments, maybe have everything ready and submitted by the end of the week.
I think that's reasonable.
Yeah, I think that's appropriate.
I just wanted to see a timeline, so I have an idea when I have to get this done.
Yeah.
Or when I have more comments.
Yeah. So I'll try to send this out. If we end up finishing up a little bit early tonight, I'll send it out right away. If not, it'll be first thing tomorrow morning. And then you could all work on it, and then just track your changes in it. Then maybe I'll send out or Bob, you can send out an email later this week to just confirm that everybody agrees with the content and that we'll accept the changes. And Bob, you can send out the letter that kind of introduces our IRC's response back.
Yeah, and if Y2Y doesn't have their final document ready, we'll just submit this one, but we'll ask them to CC the town on it when they finalize theirs.
Yeah. Yeah, and we'll just make it clear that it's a draft, but that we do still agree with the general content, but they may be refining the language in their submission. If they're okay with us doing that, I guess we should follow respectful.
Gareth, do you anticipate any problems with us going ahead with that?
You're muted, Garrett.
And I think that's quite nimble, and I think I love it. I love the fact that we're doing this. I actually have some. I've actually asked Josh to boil it down. He actually got back to me. Josh Welch is the guy's name at the Y2Y. And I'll dump those into the chat and I'll circulate them by email to this committee so that you have them. It's the distillation piece that I asked about, just to kind of make it a little bit easier perhaps for us.
Perfect.
Is that Josh formerly with the town of Canmore?
I'm actually not sure. Josh Welch, and I don't know what his history is. Sorry.
Yeah, I
Yep,
believe
it would be
he.
the same Josh.
Yeah, so if you put those in the chats, Bob, that might be helpful as you draft up your intro letter as well, if the key themes are similar.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Oh, sorry, Waverly.
Oh, sorry, just in the nitty gritty of this still, I did just have a few more comments that I'm wondering if we wanted to go over as a group rather than just type them in and have anything be a surprise.
Sure.
So are we still going through this or are we coming back to it?
No, let's go ahead and capture those if you've got them.
Yeah, if anyone has anything, we can talk about it right now for sure.
Okay, I'm gonna add a whole section on the first part, but well, we can just stay here for a sec.
Okay.
So with cumulative impacts, I think it's worth us mentioning that the scale, both temporal and spatial, needs to be defined. We can recommend or reference the paper that Gareth had mentioned with the grizzly bear metric as a spatial scale. And then for temporal, I think we could potentially reference the Yahi versus British Columbia ruling on the Blueberry River First Nation and cumulative impacts, because it gives a precedence to require cumulative effects assessment that looks back to like pre-colonial landscape and like really forces the proponent to look at all of the changes, not just the change from, you know, when they started thinking about their project to when it would be built.
Right.
And I can write that in if that's okay with everyone.
Yeah. Why don't you do that? I was like trying to capture. I was like, yeah, if you
it's
could write that
already written
in,
down over here.
that would be great. Unless anybody objects to Waverly's comments, obviously, but perfect. So.
And then I have a comment on their Indigenous engagement plan and then also on their section where they talk about traditional ecological knowledge. So if we wanted to go up to the first one, I can just, it's a partial.
Just here in the.
Okay. Yeah, I read Y2Y's comments on the engagement and I agreed a fair bit. So they've talked about Indigenous consultation. So I think we'd have to add a row that references section 1 of the AEP-TOR.
Okay. And I guess, sorry, there's a social and economic, I guess, impacts that are addressed in this that MSIS will not be addressing because they focus strictly on the environmental. So if there's anything outside of the environmental, I just want to provide that context that we wouldn't be having the third party review on it. It'd be a staff review.
Yeah, I think that's okay. I think it is environmental. It's just process based for how you get environmental.
Okay, so you want me to, add a comment or a row here? Or
yeah, probably above. So our second row right now references section 2, but I think we're going to end up referencing section 1. So just above that. Just trying to find my way back to the TOR. Yeah, so on this one, and again, I can write out bullet points, but just to summarize, first off, has the terms of reference been circulated to the Treaty 7 communities? And that goes beyond, you know, just posting it on a website and sending them the link, because what I'm reading from this is what I see a lot, where there's all these documents created and like maybe an email sent and then a decision made, and you're going, where did that come from as the First Nations Consultation Office? So I'm wondering if it's been circulated and then went into, I'll just read what I wrote here, is that the terms of reference outlines Indigenous consultation processes, but it doesn't actually touch on who will be consulted. And I think that echoes what Y2Y had said about like who would be consulted beyond the Stoney Nations, and how the proponent will ensure that consultation is meaningful. So for example, that it occurs early, occurs on Indigenous nations timelines, and that capacity supports are provided. It's not clear if the proponent is aware that the nation needs to be able to provide or withhold their free, prior, and informed consent. And so the proponent needs to demonstrate an understanding of that concept. And that relates to it's federal legislation now because UNDRIP has been adopted by the federal government as an act. So I can look into how to make that more province or town relevant, but that concept of free, prior, and informed consent seems to be like generally accepted and understood.
Okay, yeah, so if everyone agrees, Waverly can add that in as well.
Okay.
And I don't know what we would reference. There is no EIS equivalent to that comment, eh? Just for this first call, yeah, okay.
And then, so I'm not sure what section they have the traditional ecological knowledge in, but I think it might be down near the bottom.
Section 5.
Yeah, so it would just be a row at the very bottom of this, right?
Okay.
So again here, wondering if the communities are actually aware that the proponent is going to look for their knowledge on this. The terms of reference outlines a request for TEK, but doesn't note how capacity supports will be provided to the communities and or peoples who provide the knowledge. And echoing something that Y2Y had said as well, is that the language surrounding protection of TEK is really weak. So they should be required to add some sort of section that outlines protocols for protecting TEK. So that can be like the grid square-based mapping that we might see for species at risk, or just other sort of like confidentiality clauses, and a timeline for consultation surrounding TEK should be provided. So it's really clear to the nations. And that timeline needs to be really flexible. But I can write that all if everyone is okay with that as a concept.
Waverly, I just have a question for you. My experience with First Nations, it's really difficult to get anything from them. At least that was in BC. How is it here in Alberta? Is it the same thing, or are they pretty much proactive and willing to share historical information and like berry picking or whatever it may be to people who contractors or developments and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so I think that the approach has shifted, and I see where if a certain approach is taken, processes go along in a reasonably efficient manner. It's worth considering that First Nations, like I've had very challenging jobs. I've never had a job as challenging as working in a First Nations consultation office. My master's was easier by a lot. And so what they're bombarded by makes it such that even if they want to provide inputs, it's like sometimes just not feasible unless you wanted someone, working till 1 in the morning every day. So the idea of having capacity supports, and that can be, funding, there could be flexible timelines that are agreed to with the nation, that really improves the process so that you would potentially be able to get information if the nation wishes to provide that information. But quite often what we see where information isn't provided is that it's like a notice is sent and it says, we need information from you in a month and a half. And, there's not funding for the study required to do that, or to maybe like subcontract a consultant who's going to help with it. So those are the kind of considerations that can lead to success. Again, I haven't worked with the Treaty 7 nations.
Perfect. So I guess we'll just leave Waverly to add that in as well.
Caitlin, on number 4 with the comment of benchmarking, we've got the right-of-way size, but also I'd like to see add as to the type of, they're going to be removing timber. So kind of method that they're going to be using, because it does have a significant impact on the terrain. So if you're using ground systems, you've got a significant amount of erosion, potential erosion. You got to build roads, all of that sort of thing. Whereas if you're using helicopter, you don't have any of that. You just got your turnaround time and landing. So it's important to identify the systems that they're going to use for harvesting right away.
So is
Agreed.
method for removing timber removal, is that an appropriate way to say that?
Yeah, harvesting systems for timber removal within the right of way.
Would that basically go under construction methodology?
This is kind of more of an overview, not getting into the ground specifics of where you're
Right.
going to build roads and that sort of thing. This
Right.
kind of indicates that we're going to do helicopters, so we don't need roads. If you need ground systems, you build the roads. Then you get into
Yep.
more detail. Where you're going to put them.
Right. Okay.
Perfect. Okay, well, I think that's probably good for now. I think we just put on the agenda, probably Bob, to 5:30 anyways, but if no one else has anything that they think that we should discuss before we track changes in the document. Oh, Jeff?
Can we, can we scroll back up to number 2, please, for a sec?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is just more of a language consistency. I know a lot of spots we're using stronger words such as missing, and under existing site conditions, we kind of have a softer word, consider a review of existing data. I was just curious for consistency and for driving forward what we're looking for, if we should change that word. That's all.
Yeah, definitely.
Sure.
To,
Like missing a review of existing data and the gap analysis as opposed to consider. Yeah. Thank you.
that was just me writing.
Well,
Glennis is more firm. Yeah.
it's a forceful woman, that Glennis.
Yeah, she gets things
Assertive.
done.
I like to say assertive.
Assertive, yeah. So missing here.
This is also for consistency too. Thank you.
No, totally. A great point. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Well, that's going in, Caitlin. Just as an aside, do we have any visibility on what the MD of Bighorn is doing for this stuff?
Not that I know of, no.
Okay, yeah, just curious. I know they have a smaller group, but they do have a stake. It's just maybe I'll write one of their counselors and see what's going on.
Yeah, you might have you most likely have a better contact.
Thank you.
Okay.
Now, just to be clear, there is in 3.71 has baseline information required for terrain and soils. So I'm not sure we can say missing as terms of a review of existing soil conditions, because that is included already.
Okay, so do we want to just take this out so that we don't look like we're...
Yeah, I think we should maybe just remove that.
Is everyone okay if we remove this? Based on what was this section again, Bob?
3.7.1.
Yeah, they're looking for sufficient geology, topography, soil types, their distributions.
As well as soil erosion is addressed in 3.7.2.
Okay. All right. If everyone's okay with that, I can take that out. I think, Ken, that might have been your original comment, or Kevin.
No, it wasn't mine. I don't
Not
think.
yours.
I think it was, could have been mine there, Caitlin. I did see that in there, but I was thinking that with the harvesting system, that sort of thing needs to be addressed. So, but I'm okay with taking it out.
Okay. Okay, and maybe it'll be addressed in our comment down here about explaining the harvesting system.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Well, I think that was great. Got lots of good feedback, and I think we have a method to capture any additional feedback. Again, just please make sure if you type anything in that track changes is on. I'll try to turn it on before I send it out, but just double check so that everyone is aware of who's commenting what. And then Gareth, if you can get back to us with just confirmation that Y2Y is okay with us informally passing along some of their notes to be considered. And then if everyone can take a look at the Y2Y comments to make sure there's nothing in there that we are, as a group, I guess I shouldn't say you do not agree with, that we don't state that that you're supporting it in full if that's not the case.
And Kaylin, I can report that in my youthful excitement around this important work, I wrote a quick email to Josh, and so we have a thumbs up from the Y2Y that we're good to go on the course of action that we outlined.
Okay, perfect. Great. So everyone just take a look at that and make sure that you're in agreement with it before we go along. And then Bob, I guess you'll draft up a little bit of a note stating kind of the approach that we've taken. And if you can, what is it, Monday night? Is it reasonable to get everyone's kind of edits and comments by Wednesday? And that way everyone has kind of Thursday to look at the finished thing, and then we can send it off on Friday. Is that reasonable?
Wednesday night?
Yeah, we can
Yeah.
say Wednesday night. I know it's a quick turnaround, but we don't make the deadlines, I guess. That's okay with everyone. Yeah. Perfect. So I'll stay tuned to this document. I'll try to get it sent out tonight for Wednesday, and then Thursday morning we can send out. I'll remind everybody to take one last look at it. Or Bob, you can remind everybody.
Caitlin, did you send out a document this afternoon outside of the agenda and minutes?
Yeah, it was a link to the Y2Y document.
Or was that on that email?
Yeah. I'll try to send it again just to make sure that it's a package together for you.
And I had suggested SharePoint, but I just wanted to check. Sometimes people find Google Docs easier to access. Is there a preferred one here?
I think I can just in the document right now. I think I can just hit share.
You definitely can. I'm coming from a place where I had a bunch of authors on a paper where SharePoint was not accessible from some people, I realized, and I ended up with a bunch of Word documents. So just trying to help out on that front.
Thank you for that. Let's try this.
Caitlin, in the past, it's always been on Google Docs, but
Oh, okay. Yeah, because this is relatively new for the town, I believe. So your emails aren't in there, so I'll have to copy them all over. But let's try this because it's already in there. And then if not, we'll reevaluate. Okay.
okay, we're ready to move on.
Yeah, so I'll stop sharing here.
Okay, we're into updates now. Jeff, do you want to give us an update?
Updates. With respect to Three Sisters stuff, the town, we're still working through our process, so stay tuned for more. In terms of what I've heard about the train proposal, haven't heard much at all there either. So that seems to be kind of like fallen a little bit off of the radar there. We just came off of a public hearing for the 800 Canmore, which is that area down by South Canmore, where there's the potential of the palliative care center and some homes, and it's a pretty big public hearing, and I think at least 4, 5, 6 hours. And so because of the complexity of the issue, we decided not to vote for second reading or third reading at that point. And so we have decided to push that back to, I believe, first Tuesday of July. Yeah, so there's a whole process of that whole thing there. It's been a little bit more drawn out. It's definitely interesting to see. Lots of folks bringing forth opinions on the environmental side. Lots of people bring forth stuff on the social side, the palliative care center, and it's a contentious one. So we'll see where it goes to. Other than that,
Sorry, Jeff, that's going to second reading in June or third reading?
second reading.
Second reading.
Yeah, and so what happens is there's a whole bunch of pieces going back and forth, and we'll see what will get presented, and then we'll present more amendments possibly. A second, we'll vote for second reading on July, that first Tuesday of July, and we'll see where it goes from there. If it passes second, we'll go to third. Otherwise, it might be done at that point. But so lots for councilors to consider. Public hearing stage is done, so we're just trying to sequester ourselves and not taking any more impact on that piece, just to respect the process. So yeah. But if you guys have questions for myself about some council stuff, other than Three Sisters, I can totally answer or try my best. Gareth.
Was there for the 800 camera, the South camera stuff? Was there ever an EIS done for that particular process? I'm not sure. I'm the new guy, so.
Yep, no, for sure. There was an EIS that this was also before my time as well. The third party reviewer was MSIS, who's also going to be the third party reviewer for the gondola, if that name sounds familiar. And many of the fine people here on ERC were a part of that review back then. I can't remember when that review was done exactly off the top of my head, but yeah, but I believe Bob and Glynis and Ken there and some other folks were part of it too. Yeah. I think there's interesting discussion there on the cumulative impact piece and then the balancing of the cumulative impact and just the very strange contextual history of that piece of land, how it was considered a habitat patch, but then at the same time, someone also zoned it for like future development. So definitely making our lives more complicated there on that one. Yeah.
A curiosity about this one, and maybe other members of the committee could answer, but something that struck me as really strange with it is I've never seen a 10-meter wetland buffer actually go through. I think the absolute smallest I've ever seen was about 15. Okay, different jurisdictions. Is that common? Like, would that be a generally acceptable setback from a wetland here?
My experience in BC is somewhat different. I can't speak about Alberta, but in wildlife patches, you can move right up to the edge of it for activities, but residential, I think it has to be further back on that. For stream channels, depends on what type of stream it is. Recurring management can be, there's a recurring management zone and also recurring reserve zone. So it depends on size, and something like that you'd have both recurring management and recurring reserve zone, because it's what we would have called probably an S2 stream in BC. So, and I'm not sure what it is here, but you definitely want to have some buffer along those streams because they probably are fish habitat as well.
Yeah, there was a little wetland pocket in the southwest of the site, I think.
Yeah.
And they had the 10-meter setback there, and where I come from, 30-meter wetland setbacks are the typical. I know it's a smaller town, so it might be a little different, and it was a smaller feature, but I have seen 15. I've never seen less than that for a wetland. So I intended to submit a comment and I got too busy, but maybe for the second reading, would it be possible for you to circulate the notice of that to us, Jeff? Is that allowable?
What do you mean by the notice of that? Like, are you hoping to get further input put in, or
for when the meeting date is decided on, if there's a public notice of second reading?
Oh, yeah.
It's going
second
forward.
meeting will definitely be happening on July, the first Tuesday of July. Let me just check my calendar here. I'm sorry. It is July 5th. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, you betcha.
So anybody else have a comment or for the round table? Gareth?
Well, two things. One is, the main thing actually, I think any conversation that I've ever been part of for 30 years now about EIS or EIA or so on, somebody usually says somewhere in there that who is looking at the big picture? What about the death by 1,000 cuts? What about that? And it's really noteworthy that we finally have that. It's a cumulative environmental assessment, properly done by the Yellowstone Yukon gang, and it's still, because it was just released today and they just put it on the website today. I still don't fully understand what the implications of that are for those who think about EISs and EIAs and so on. But it's probably a it's probably significant. And I just, and I guess Bob, as chair, I wonder if there's a way that, certainly I know the Y2Y group will be having a kind of a general audience kind of come and learn about our cumulative environmental assessment for in July, I think. I'm not sure of the date exactly, but that might be a useful thing. And this is an important committee. I'd like to see us, I suppose, formally get a piece of that and just learn about it, whatever that looks like. And I know there is a consultation coming up for the town of Canmore, actually, that is already scheduled. And I wonder if as a committee, we might be part of that and get in sort of sooner rather than later, so that work begins to inform our work.
Sounds like a really great opportunity. Gareth, did you hear more about this? Would you let us know what the dates are?
Yeah, that sounds good. Why don't I connect? I'll send an email to Caitlin and Josh and say, hey, some information about the town of Canmore, these opportunities, and I'll get you in on that email, Bob, and then you guys can figure out what that whole process looks like.
Sounds great.
It's noteworthy that Jeff Ma has his own in-house consultant on this front, so he doesn't need to be at that meeting.
Well, I try not to talk about this stuff at home too much. but yeah, like it'd be good to write Josh, because I'm not exactly sure if Y2Y is coming from a scope of, but we'll do a presentation for council level, and then there's a general one, or the sort of thing is if there's a broad reach, like let's get one for everybody. But I would definitely think there'd be like value in that and getting that checked out.
Thanks. And apologies, Jeff, I just had to make that in-house
No,
consultant
for sure.
at some point, we're just waiting, really.
Yeah, just waiting.
Will do.
Does anybody else have anything? Ralph, I can't see your head's shaking yes or no, so I'm going to assume you don't have anything. Okay.
I'm good. Sorry.
Where to go? Well,
Still in the car.
I'll ask Jeff a question there on the South Canmore. We had a fair amount of talk about the South Canmore area. I did walk it, and there is a lot of wildlife use on that particular piece of land in there. And you could probably look on files. There's probably pictures there as well.
Yeah, no.
If you have time, go walk it.
Councillor Graham and I, we walked it the couple of days before the public hearing, and definitely there's lots of sign and evidence of wildlife use there. And for example, like the elk come in, they're like chipping away at the vegetation, etc. So yeah, there's definitely stuff that happens in there for sure.
Yeah, there was some bear scat in there when I was there as well.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
When were you going through there, Ken? That was like,
well, just before we reviewed it. I think it was last year.
Right. Last year, okay, gotcha. Yeah,
I think it was last fall.
Yeah.
It's interesting. A lot of people have walked the site. I think the visibility of the proposed development got a lot of people like getting in there, kind of curious and seeing it further.
Yeah. The other was the potential high water table, where they're looking at putting stuff across the creek and then the bridge. Like, holy cow!
Lots of pieces there. Yep, lots of pieces. Yeah.
Perfect. So
Okay, let's move on. Is there any new business from anybody? Seeing none, we'll move on.
I've just remembered, sorry. When all the snow melted and the grass wasn't quite growing as well, I was appalled by how many cigarette butts were like, directly adjacent to water courses. People are throwing them in the wetland in the middle of town at Policeman's Creek. And something that I saw from a committee my friend was on in the city we lived in was that they had like these little cigarette disposals they'd put places, or like even pocket ones, and they had a whole thing happening about it. And I wonder if there's something for future meetings to explore there.
Sounds like a good opportunity to tackle another issue.
Yeah, sorry to add something to the plate, but I picked them up one day. I just got so fired up, and I had like 4 dog bags full, and that was just from a walk down the boardwalk and back.
Do you have a picture of that? Because that'd be very helpful to like forward to like planning as well, just to be like, or just be, hey guys, like this is a thing. That'd be great.
Yeah, I sent it to Caitlin at one point. I'll see if I can pull it back up.
Caitlin's a smoker though.
I am not. Don't put that title on me. And I don't litter. Yeah, Waverly, I don't remember off the top of my head that email. So yeah, please circulate it again. But we can, I know we talked about putting this on the list for a future meeting previously.
Oh, the photo didn't attach. I will resend it.
Oh, okay.
That's
You
okay.
send it to
Trying
all of
remember.
us just for
Yeah.
context?
I
Yeah.
will. Yeah, it was crazy. It was just like, and I've talked to people before in a different place about this, like where they were throwing them down the storm sewers and there was like a fish label on it. And I ended up speaking with a few people who just had no clue that there could be a damage or anything. So it might be a worthwhile educational pursuit.
Throw that in the brochure that we're gonna make for the hotels.
Dogs and cigarette butts.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
That is unbelievable, but obviously happening.
Yeah.
Oh, Gary, you're on mute, bud.
So we have our next meeting scheduled for June 20th, and I believe you've lined up the Alberta Environment and Parks person that's going to talk to us.
Yeah, one of the wildlife biologists for Alberta Environment Parks will be speaking to us about their practices and what they're seeing as the trends and bigger issues coming up when it comes to wildlife. So I think it'll just be some additional context for this group, especially as you're reviewing EISs. And even I know there was some talk about maybe providing a note to council just as, hey, this is something ERC's thinking about for them to consider in action, how they see appropriate. So yeah, I think it'll be interesting. We often get to hear too much from them, so it'll be good.
Yeah, I'm hoping that after we have this meeting, maybe I can get together with Gareth and Nick, and maybe we can look at a presentation to council on those two issues. And you know, maybe some recommendations that we've discussed among us as well, and just to get it on the council's radar for future consideration.
Hey, Bob, hearing that, would it be okay with the committee if I invited Nick to attend that June 20th meeting?
Most definitely.
Cool. Do you happen to know who's speaking? Caitlin, do you remember the name?
Brett Buchel.
Okay, nice.
And then potentially someone from Fish and Wildlife who does more of the enforcement side. So deals with hazing, like, as bears come into town and that side of things. But I haven't received confirmation from him yet. But yeah, I think there might be, I'll have to speak with our municipal clerks about how exactly, if there was a presentation to go to council or the committee of the whole, how that would go forward. But I'm thinking potentially as a delegation. So you'd have 10 minutes to go forward and just present to council like any other delegation. The Biosphere was there not too long ago. And say, hey, this is some stuff we're doing. These are some recommendations. And then council will consider them in their strategic planning and budgeting as they move forward.
Great.
Unless Jeff, you have anything, or Councillor Ma, you have anything else you want to think about that?
No, I think delegation is great if there's something that you guys want to present towards. I think some people present as a presentation, some people present with an ask. If there is an ask, etc., like just really clarify what that would be. I think that's helpful. Yeah.
Sure.
Great.
Very open to that, Bob. Good idea. Thanks.
Great.
Okay. Jeff, is there anything around fuel management happening in town? Fire smarting?
Fuel management?
Fire smarting or bear?
No, fire smarting or fuel management.
Yeah, like we have ongoing measures with that sort of stuff going on. And so what happens is they kind of map it and they go through parts of the town through like a process. And so Caitlin Miller would be really great to like talk about stuff because she can like show the process. But it's definitely top of mind. And you might have noticed there's some signs coming up this weekend, this June 3rd, 4th, and 5th. There is also a wildfire emergency planning exercise. So there's a little more real time. And so what they'll be doing is they're imagining there's like a fire that's coming in from Banff. And the fire that they're working with is a little, but like by, Caitlin's admission as well, because it's the first time we're doing this test. It's a more well-behaved fire, right? So it behaves a little more like easily, it kind of quiets down at night, it doesn't jump the river, etc. But you got to start somewhere, right? And then what they'll be doing is for the large area, because the fire will be coming in, the imaginary fire will be coming in from Banff. They're going to do some like, kind of evacuation drill sort of stuff. They're putting stuff on people's doors. People do not actually have to evacuate, but they're just kind of using this as like an exercise to see where the gaps are. And then there'll be some other pieces too, like where they're going to lay sprinkler line, for example. Those of you guys who live up by the Nordic Center, they will actually tap into like the sprinkler systems that they use for snowmaking up at the Nordic Center. So if there were a fire, heaven forbid, never coming down for that area, see like Nordic Center infrastructure would be part of that. How they would deploy sprinkler trucks with the big hoses, all those pieces. So it's the first exercise. And then from there, it will inform like future exercises as well. Yeah.
Now, just where I was going with this is if there's an opportunity to have a group go out and see some of this fuel management that's happening, this fire smarting that's happening within the community, so we have a better idea as to what it actually looks like compared to what it was. And I know I did go out in the past with the contractor, and it was quite informative of what they're doing. I've been involved with this for years, but it was really good to see some of that being done and the complexity between private land, crown land, city land, provincial land. So it does create a lot of issues around that. So it would be well worth go kick some dirt, as I often say, to get the best results.
Well, Caitlin, is it possible for us to connect with someone that maybe could give us a little more info and take us for a walk or something if we were looking? I'm not sure if that would be Caitlin Miller, or if that would also go all the way down to like Carrie Martins, who it was like assistant fire chief, if it
Yeah.
goes to that level too.
I think a lot of it's managed through Carrie Martins. I'd have to talk to her about kind of their process and if they typically do tours and how that would work. But we can have that conversation, and if there's value for her to do that for ERC, and it will be beneficial in living out your mandate, I think we could do that. But yeah, I guess I'm not the person to give the tour, so I'll have to check and see if there's.
Yeah.
I went out with, I think it was Stu I went out with.
Stu Wackershaw?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it would be it might be Stu again. I'm not exactly he probably laid out the plan still for us. So
It was a nice walk anyways. It was good to see.
Which area did you guys do last time? Was it on the other side?
Just up on Benchland.
Yeah.
Benchland. Yeah.
Is there a site in did you had in mind, or like the other half of town, the other side that you wanted to look at, or?
No, it's not in particular, but I guess the important thing is, when you do that, what happens to the wildlife, what happens to the ecosystem? It increases wildlife habitat, it increases the biodiversity as well when you start doing that. So it has some positive effects across the landscape.
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting to go. Yeah.
Perfect.
Great. Okay, if that's everything, thanks everybody for joining us tonight. And I need a motion to adjourn. Caitlin, or Glynis, sorry. Okay, we'll talk to you guys all soon.
Stay safe, everyone.
Bye.
Email me if
Thank
you need
you.